S08E26. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition. Oh, that's a close-up view. There we go. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Afternoon, Alex. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. It's good to see you at ultra zoom mode.
Yeah, went in much more zoomed in mode than normal to start with, but that's all good. Look, been an interesting week of results. Only the 1 point picked up from the two games played against Stoke and Norwich. We'll start with that Stoke game, I guess. Not a whole lot to say out of it. A pretty dour sort of 0-0, which we've come to expect from games with Stoke. Yeah, granted, I mean, in saying that, there's been a few games recently where they've played us off the park and beaten us comfortably, including earlier this season. So a 0-0 is a step in the right direction against them, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Away to Stoke is always, a difficult fixture, particularly for City, and that's proven so over the last few years. So, I guess in many ways, taking a point in this one, doesn't come as a huge surprise. I think a loss would have been incredibly disappointing and, just frustrating on the whole. But to come away with a point from this, I think is probably about right. And, in many ways, a result that we'll happily take. Definitely can't compare to what 3 points away would have felt like. But I think one point's a fair assessment and a helpful takeaway.
Yeah, that's it. And it's hard to judge this game in isolation, not with the context of the Norwich result. But at the time, you sort of think it's another point on the road. As Rosie said after the game, it's just sort of showing how hard we are to beat, how hard we are to break down. And I guess you sort of look at Stoke's position in the table. You think maybe we feel like we've sort of walked away 2 points less than we should have. But at the same time, we had a couple of chances. I thought Oscar looked sharp in attack, seemed to offer a bit. Unfortunately, out of the game, Connolly looks like he's picked up a knock. He missed the Norwich game and looks like he'll miss Preston as well. He had a couple of really good opportunities as well. And I thought Jones and McLaughlin in defence were really outstanding at the heart of it.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much summed it up. It was as we said, a 0-0 game. There's not always a heap to talk about, but there were a few kind of bright sparks. And yeah, as you mentioned, the Connolly injury, I think, is probably the most effective thing, or negatively affecting City at the moment. But outside of that, there were some pretty pleasing performances, and as you said, it was another clean sheet on the road nonetheless. So. A few things to take away, but obviously when we sit this side of the podcast and know what happened in the following fixture against Norwich, you kind of look back on this one and you're not as disappointed, because I think we left our kind of worst attempt to Wednesday morning.
That's it. Look, I would say the only other negative probably out of the Stoke game was, unfortunately, probably Malcolm Ebiohe's debut. Looked really sort of out of place. I sort of said at the time, hopefully it was just a fitness thing. It didn't look a whole lot better against Norwich. Looked a little bit better. But yeah, that Stoke performance was quite a cause for concern, and hopefully it's just a matter of getting up to speed.
Oh, look, absolutely. If we're still speaking this way, 10 games in, I think there'd be a cause for concern, but I'm pretty certain that I trust the gaffer and the way that he sees that role for Ebiohe, and I do think he will turn into a very different player than what the first two performances in a City shirt have suggested.
Well, that's it. Look, we will move on to Norwich. We'll do our votes first. We'll move on to Norwich, where I think there's probably a bit more to say. I gave Jones the 3 votes in this one, McLaughlin the 2, sort of just as I was saying before. I thought at centre-backs they were outstanding. It's, 3 clean sheets in a row as a back line, unchanged team from the last 2 games. Really great to see from them. I did sort of struggle for a third player for votes. I did land on Oscar for the 1. I thought he was pretty strong up forward. He forced a good save out of the Stoke keeper. But yeah, just one of those games that won't live too long in the memory.
No, absolutely not. I think I would just not create any arguments. I think the quicker we get past this game and move on to the next one, the better. So I'll match you. Let's say 3 for Jones, 2 for McLaughlin, and we'll give the solitary point to Oscar.
Good stuff. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, it is on to Norwich, the Wednesday morning game, our time. lot of anticipation and hype heading into this one. It was really kind of billed as our biggest game in quite a while, if for nothing else than to just give us sort of a yardstick for how we were looking against other sides chasing those promotion playoffs places. We did go in with 4 changes. I guess Rosie saw it as a chance to sort of freshen up, and I guess you sort of look at it as almost that opportunity to really attack the fixture by making some changes to the side, changing the shape, which ultimately I think was probably the wrong call. It's a really hard one because I look at the fact that Graves scores our opening goal, and you think you could make a case for saying we should have kept the back line the same as the one that's kept 3 clean sheets. But we did have Graves come in for Elder, Tede come in for the injured Connolly, and then Woods and Longman came in for Doherty and Tufan. I mean, we've sort of spoken previously, and there's been a lot of discussion about the fact I just don't know if Woods and Seri really work as a 2 in midfield. They're a bit too similar, and you think sort of if you're dropping Doherty out, it doesn't leave you very mobile in those sort of midfield slots when you've got Slater playing out wide. I think I said in the chat I would have been really curious to see someone like Xavier Simons play. Granted, you probably don't throw him in against a Norwich, but maybe whether we give him a go against a Preston or someone just to. He seems that sort of player where it's a bit of a different role, different capability as a player. That's sort of what we're lacking at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that the Woods combination with Seri is showing too much at this point in time. However, with that being said, I do think that having the 2 kind of passing workman-like performances that you've got, as you said, you got 2 of the same players, but I think that's probably already added to maybe the guile that we are demonstrating in the midfield, and perhaps maybe adds to a bit more of like that defensive cover. So that's maybe one thing that I would say about it. But yeah, I'd be fascinated to see, if Rosinha does kind of look to see if there is a place for Simons in there. And as you mentioned, there'd be a time to kind of try that. It's definitely not, at Carrow Road against Norwich. But if there was, a chance where we did, get that second goal lead in the 70th minute against, a team in the next couple of weeks, and you were able to kind of test the waters and see what a partnership like that would look like. I'd be fascinated to see it, and I actually would be surprised if it wasn't on Rosinha's mind already. Is that the best midfield combination? But we come back to what's the type of or brand of football that he's looking to to see played, and a lot of it's very much playing out from the back, making sure that we're linking up in their passes and not just giving away possession quite easily. So I think when you look at that as the kind of formula that he wants to play with, like Woods and Seri both fit that mold as players who do like to have the ball at their feet and distribute. So I see his logic, even though it doesn't feel like perhaps the most powerful partnership at the moment.
And title of this episode's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, calling it Dreams Dashed. Obviously, a few people looking at that result and thinking that it's sort of the end of the road for a playoff push, and the sky's falling in, that sort of thing. What's your sort of take on sort of the fallout from that game and how we played?
Yeah, look, it was. I think even we were guilty of it as well in the the chat, talking about the game before, saying it's one of the biggest games that we've had in history in the last few years, and I mean rightfully so. It's given the fans a chance to be optimistic, and that's a fair play to what Rosinha's done with the squad in recent times. But when you consider all of those things, losing to Norwich away and getting a point at Stoke, those 2 events in isolation aren't exactly kind of the worst thing. I think that we fell victim to the hype train and started dreaming too early. And the one thing that we do have to constantly remind ourselves of is how long the championship season is. I mean, we are the middle of February, and there is still, I don't know, upwards of 30 points still up for grabs. And so when you're talking about a gap of 5 points or thereabouts between us and the playoff places, things can change very quickly. I still go back to the post-Christmas, early January. We were still talking about the possibility of relegation and how it had been a kind of poor window. Granted, the World Cup kind of changed things because there was that massive halftime break. But with all those things considered, I just think that it's not the end of the world. There's still a lot of football to be played, and those particular teams aren't exactly teams that I'd expect to be, walking away and kind of raking 6 points off. So, look, disappointed, but I'm not on the doom and gloom, season's over kind of fence just yet.
I think that's it. I think it's it's fine to get excited and sort of optimistic about where the season can take us. And as you say, we saw this game as a big game and as a yardstick, but I don't think it was never our playoff final. Like, it was never a case of if we lost this game, it was all over, or if we won it, we were in the playoffs. Like, it was a good yardstick to say to us, okay, well, where are we at against a team in and around the same places as us, who just had everything clicked for them. And we have to remember, like, they were in the Premier League last season. So they've got an array of talent far beyond what we've got in the side. So you've still got games to come against your Lutons, your Millwalls, your we've played Sunderland twice, I think, but a couple of those sorts of sides where we're competing for the same places as them, and they're much more around the same capabilities as us. So I think, everyone's entitled to be excited and optimistic, but I don't think you should be so carried away that it then means that when results don't go our way, it's all sack the manager or sky's falling sort of thing, which I think, unfortunately I've seen from a few people sort of saying, Rossini didn't get the tactics right, and, kind of not writing him off as a manager, but kind of slating him for it. Like, it's far too early to be getting that carried away about results, both in the season context, but also both in our journey. Because I think I look at the fact that Rossini has been here for 3-4 months now, maybe. We've seen some player turnover. We've seen, as you said, we were still talking about relegation when he came in, and he's pulled us completely away from that up into the top half. So we're clearly on an upward trajectory. We've got another summer transfer window to come where we'll make some more moves and make some more adjustments. And I just sort of view this half of the season as, look, if we do somehow make the playoffs, great, that's sort of a bonus. But it's a good chance just to see where all the players are at, what our capabilities are, and what we need to do in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, it's one of those things that you're always going to appreciate making the playoffs because it is that free hit. But let's not forget that Burnley and Sheffield are probably, two teams that are, I would dare say, leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the pack as far as, certainly how the ladder reads. And then you can almost kind of throw a blanket over what's left, such as the closeness of this season in the championship. And so you kind of do wonder, if we got to the playoffs, it would be very much a roll of the dice. Like, it would feel in some ways premature considering where we were at Christmas time. And I know that no football fan wants to ever be that pessimistic because if you got a chance in the playoffs, anything can happen. But I would be very surprised if City were to kind of sneak into the playoffs and mount a promotion run this season, given the amount of change and the amount of inroads that have already kind of been made. It would be an incredibly surprising situation to find ourselves in the sixth playing for a Premier League berth this early on under the new regime, I guess.
Yeah, and I look at Middlesbrough's form and obviously knocking Sheffield United off the other morning, and maybe that's part of why I'm not as fussed about the playoffs, because I sort of look at that top three as almost the three to go up for promotion. So
yeah,
I don't see it, whether you make the playoffs or not, you're sort of just making up the numbers potentially. But look, not a whole lot else to add. I guess the other point on the pitch I had was seeing a lot of the criticism around Slater out of the game and his form over the last few games. And I was curious to see, it definitely seems he's becoming one of those players, almost like David Myler was back in the day, where, there'd be people that would be sort of praising them for their effort and their hard work and it's the stuff that doesn't always get noticed. And then there'd be the others sort of, as soon as the game's getting lost, they're the ones that come in for the brunt of the criticism.
Well, I think that if that's the biggest thing that the armchair fans are kind of looking to criticize is Slater. Slater, let's not forget the transfer fee that he demanded, and there's a whole lot more higher wage earners in the City outfit that probably aren't pulling their weight as far as if you want to look at the disparity. So. If that's who we're throwing stones at, then I'm very intrigued, because I think for the price that that he kind of has been and the player that he's demonstrated himself to be, if he is one of these kind of rocks and diamonds players that has off weeks, so be it. But I tend to quickly gravitate towards the 2 goals against Cardiff to kind of, earn us 3 points, somewhat single-handedly in many ways. So, look, I think people are always going to have their opinions, and they're very entitled to it. But I think it's just good to have a reality check on, who's in the squad and what their role is. I mean, the fact that Slater is not just a kind of rotation player, I think is somewhat mesmerizing. And I'm really impressed by the kind of development. Like, I think he's someone who has played well and truly above what I thought his capabilities were. And so if it's taken this long for the shade to start getting thrown, I think he's probably doing a lot more right than he is wrong.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, as you say, it's not just one, it's not just two, it's 3 managers in a row now that have basically seen him as a mainstay of that starting 11. I mean, even 4, arguably, if you want to throw Grant in there as well. With Shotter, Dawson, and now Rosie. He's been pretty much a mainstay. So you'd like to think that they probably between them have some sort of idea of his quality. And I thought he was one of the best against Norwich. I thought he, when we sort of talked earlier about the lack of mobility of Woods and Seri in this game, I thought Slater was one of the really sort of bright outlets that we had when we were under the cosh kind of constantly from Norwich. Is that when he'd get the ball, he'd be able to bring it up the field and find an outlet in Tete, or at least sort of get up into those attacking areas.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I had him pegged as my I don't want to spoil it, but I had him pegged as 1 point. So it was a very workmanlike performance that we've come to expect.
Yeah, well, on that good segue, maybe we'll just go to you for your votes for this game.
Yeah, so I obviously I had Tete as my 3. I thought that I was extremely frustrated with him, as we all were, on the back of the kind of the headbutt incident and how crucial that kind of was in the landscape of that particular game. And I think that for him to kind of show as much of a kind of working attitude and approach that he did to the game against Norwich, I thought he chased everything. He worked really hard to push defenders and just made it really hard for them to play out, and it just seemed like he was kind of everywhere. So he was my 3 points. I thought that that he just did a huge effort, and as I said, because of the frustration that kind of existed with him because of that incident, I thought it kind of showed that he was trying to work himself back in for his kind of teammates. So I think that's the type of performance that the City fans have, certainly come to love, or that type of player. McLaughlin was my 2 points. I thought he was pretty solid again. Despite us conceding 3 goals in the end, it's always hard to give you points to a defender when you've lost by 3 goal scoreline. But I thought he was pretty good. And then, as I said, Slater was my 1.
Yeah, pretty much it's the same 3 players for me, just in a slightly different order. I also went Tete for the 3. I thought his work rate, especially down the left, sort of covering on that left-hand side, getting in real deep to help win the ball back. And then also I thought up the field, he was one of the, his ability and work rate as an outlet for us up the field sort of highlighted to me sort of what a weaker game that Oscar had. I thought Oscar was a lot quieter and more anonymous than Tete. When you look at the work rate that Tete was putting in by comparison, I thought he was fantastic. I went Slater for the 2 votes. I thought his game was brilliant and really energetic, and really that basically that only spark that we had in midfield, which was great to see. Which is why I was so surprised at the criticism he was copying for the game. And then, McLaughlin for the 1 vote. And I'm sort of realising we're leaving out Greaves, who actually got the goal at the start of the game. I thought he was all right, but probably in terms of his defensive efforts and so on, just wasn't as sharp as McLaughlin. So McLaughlin edged it for me in that one. That's about it. Look, I mean, we do have a bit of off-field news to discuss. We sort of touched on it before the podcast went to air as well, just in terms of the potential sports village around the site of the stadium. Being over here in Australia, we don't have as much context or understanding or connection to the Hull Fair, which is sort of the main sticking point on whether it goes ahead in that area. So we can't really comment too much on its place in sort of Hull folklore in that sense. I was actually surprised here. So it's been going since the 7th century, which is, a fair while. Not always in the same spot, but it's a fair bit of tradition behind it, which is pretty impressive. But maybe just talking more generally on the redevelopment of the area, on building up the academy, on building up the training facilities and stuff. It seems long overdue that we get some sort of investment into the training facilities.
Sure. And I think, what I take away, I kind of echo your sentiments. And I think we are so removed down under to kind of even be able to speak into that stuff. But I think the reality is that it really shows the progress that the club's making, and at least the thinking that's going on. Like, if that's the direction that this, management kind of want to invest into the club and the kind of long-term future that they see, I think that can only be a more pleasing thing for the people in Hull and the city of Hull and us supporters to know that that's actually where their thoughts at. It's not about just gaining some kind of quick smart or quick fire promotion, or, get a few players in, have a roll at the dice, see how we go. And then, after a few years that hobby's not for them anymore. It really shows that there's a large amount of forethought going into the club. And I think if you merely look at that in isolation, that's an incredibly pleasing, and comforting thing for fans to hear. So, I mean, look, whether it gets over the line, I'm not so sure. And I'm sure people will have very differing views depending on where they're located around the world or located in Hull or not. But it does sound like there's some really good stuff happening behind the scenes.
No doubt. Okay, cool. Well, just before we do our preview of the Preston game, are you up for a round of Who Am I?
I'm always up for a round of Who Am I? Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, this is going to be an interesting one. So I made 13 appearances for City, scoring 7 goals.
Oh. Okay. I don't know if this will be it, but I feel like this is going to be I'm going to have a bite at the cherry straight up. I think it could be Harry Wilson.
It is Harry Wilson. Yeah, I was going to say I was going to be very impressed if you got that right away, but it is a high number of goals.
It's very rare that you have a player come on loan and be incredibly prolific, and it was towards the end of that season under Adkins. Adkins, if I remember correctly.
Adkins, yeah.
And it had been a dismal period. And then, it almost felt like a shock that we just found this rich kind of run of form towards the end of the season. I remember it largely because of his goal scoring run. So as soon as you said 7 goals in 13 games, it's really hard to think of City players who have been that prolific. So, that's definitely, that's our boy.
Yeah, Tony, as soon as you were shaping up to give a guess, I was like, oh, he's got it. Because as you said, there's not many players that would fall into that category. Joined online in 2018, played on the wing wearing the number 49. It was that sort of, it was interesting. I was looking at where we actually finished that season. We still finished in 18th, which feels quite low considering the, the form or the goal scoring ability that we showed. Because that was, I think, Hernandez came back from injury as well. And we had a couple of those crazy highs, like we had the 5-5 with Bristol City and things like that. So it was a bit of a crazy season, that one.
Well, absolutely. And I remember there was also the hint of us trying to sign him, or at least there were transfer rumors about trying to sign him for the next season. I remember being incredibly excited, clearly, that we thought we might have pinched a player of that caliber, but it obviously wasn't to be. But what an impressive period, and what a great, memorable loan signing he was.
Yeah, no doubt. Just picking up a player, you sort of think those kids that come in from loan from those big clubs, you think, oh, look, they'll be all right. They might show a little bit. He just hit the ground running. It was pretty awesome to see. Cool. Okay. Well, we've got Preston at home on the weekend. Preston, one of those interesting sides, a bit like us this season, that are actually playing a whole lot better away from home than at home. So a very different prospect away from home than they would be at their ground, where we drew 0-0 earlier this season. They've got 2 wins in their last 5, and although I think they drew midweek as well. So not in the strongest run of form. I think they're a couple of places below us in the table, which is just making it one of those sorts of, just like the Norwich game, really, it's a chance to play a side around us in the table and really put down a benchmark for where we are as a team. And you'd sort of want to think, on the back of 2 games without a win, it's a good chance to bounce back and get 3 points in this one.
Absolutely. I think we'll relish, being back at home as well. And as you said, one of those teams around the same point of us on the league ladder. And, if there is any hope, as we said, I haven't necessarily written us off, but if there is any more kind of burning embers still sitting there that, that might ignite one last push, well, then these are the types of games that you just absolutely have to be winning. It's, I guess it's one of those true 6-pointers because of where they're located. And I think there'll be a lot of confidence back at home. I think that particularly the run of form that we've been on up until, certainly the Norwich result, I think there'll be a really strong feeling in the camp that they want to rectify that result. And, returning back to the MKM will be a huge boost. And they would probably be looking at this as a great opportunity. I know Rosinya would certainly think this is a game that demands 3 points if we're going to have anything left to kind of to give for the rest of the season. So I'm confident about this one. I feel really positive. I don't think that Preston, they've got some threats, but they're certainly not a side that I look at it and have an overwhelming amount of fear about playing. And I think that the City players will probably be sitting in the same boat.
Yeah, I think one of their more dangerous players this season, Ched Evans, is out suspended. I don't know if Robbie Brady's going to be in their team to play us. It would be always interesting to see him back at the MKM. You talk about boosts. I mean, we've got Pelkas, who did have a run out against Norwich midweek, looked reasonably sharp, I thought. I don't think he looked like he had too many fitness issues coming out of that one. Maybe in line for a start in this one. Obviously talked earlier about the fact that Connolly will still be missing. Eboe still looks like he's coming up to fitness as well. Still a little way off, but I guess also worth noting Adama Traore with a goal and an assist in the under-23s during the week as well. So great to see him progressing back from injury. Probably still a few games off from the seniors, but good to start to see some of these guys who've been out for a while with injuries coming back into the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's I guess football is a funny thing, and it'd be strange to be watching a brand new signing, feature for the first team in March of the next year. But, that's the position we find ourselves in, and it would be really nice to see him. I did saw intently the performance that he put in. It will be awesome to see Traore, when he finally does crack the first team again, ends up to speed.
Yeah, that's it. So, I mean, in terms of changes for this one, look, I'd probably be open to seeing Pelkas start the game if he's deemed fit enough to do so. But otherwise, in terms of lineup changes, I guess you'd probably look at maybe doing a Doherty in for Woods as probably the other change. I don't know if you maybe it's an interesting one up front, because if you were really picking players on form, you're almost looking at maybe giving Oscar a rest on the bench and maybe starting a Tete up front on his own.
Yeah, look, that will be interesting, and especially because it is at home. And I think that we'll probably favour a more attacking approach. I think we will really throw the proverbial kitchen sink at them. So I don't really have any thoughts. I would be very surprised, incredibly surprised to see the same team start as we saw at Norwich.
Yeah. I would I get the feeling, as you say, we'll probably throw the sink at them. So it could be, a 2-0 sort of win. I suspect, though, with Preston's sort of defensive strengths, it might be something we can settle for a 1-0 victory in. But yeah, hopefully another clean sheet at home would be nice. Look, that's the other question is after the 3 goals conceded at Norwich, does Rosie use that as an excuse to throw Darlow in for Ingram? It would be incredibly harsh, but you always get the sense with those sorts of, when you bring in a keeper on loan, you almost have to look for an excuse to get them in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I would hesitate to say that he would do that so soon, given the fact that there was, 3 clean sheets that existed prior. However, yeah, as you said, stranger things have happened. I will be really fascinated to see this team sheet. I think this is probably one of the more unguessable ones, given what we've seen in the last 7 days of form. But I tend to agree with you on this one, Alex. I think that there's a confidence in, or quiet confidence, whether it's warranted or not. I can see us getting 2 goals, and perhaps we might even see the unveiling of our new central midfield partnership that we've been calling for in Simons and Seri. This could be the game to give it a whirl. But I mean, let's not take anything for granted. I think it'll be an incredibly tough fixture for us. And 3 points here definitely has us, just kind of daring to dream a little bit more than last week.
That's it. Well, look, thanks for joining me for this one. Hopefully we can keep that dream going a few more weeks at least.
Yeah, let's hope so.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. We'll be back this time next week or a little bit earlier, maybe on the Wednesday next week, just to review that Preston game and look ahead to the next set of fixtures. But until then, come on, City.